Sergeant Marcus Webb crouched in the rubble of what used to be a supply depot on Kepler 62F, a contested border world where humans and the CarriedHer Empire had been fighting a brutal proxy war for 3 years. The battle ended hours ago with CarriedHer forces retreating in disarray, leaving behind scorched earth and the kind of silence that made Marcus's skin crawl. His unit was sweeping for survivors and unexploded ordnance when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind. Someone breathing, labored and wet, the sound of lungs struggling. He found her half buried under collapsed infrastructure, a CarriedHer soldier with long curved ears matted with blood and skin faded to sickly gray instead of healthy opalescence. Her armor was shattered, one leg twisted at an impossible angle, and there was a plasma burn across her abdomen that should have killed her hours ago. She was dying, and her own forces had left her behind. Marcus's tactical AI immediately flagged her as enemy combatant and recommended neutralization or leaving her for retrieval teams. His commanding officer's standing orders were explicit. No aid to enemy wounded, limited resources, too much risk of ambush. But looking at her, at the way her chest barely rose, at the fear in her amber eyes when she registered his presence, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He dropped his rifle, shrugged off his pack, and reached for her. She flinched away with a sound of pure terror, trying to drag herself backward despite the obviously broken leg. Marcus held up his hands, palms out, and said quietly, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm getting you out of here." She didn't understand English, but he kept talking anyway as he carefully shifted debris off her trapped leg, his voice steady and calm. "Easy, I know it hurts. We're going to get you help, just hold on." When he lifted her, she was lighter than expected, her species apparently less dense than humans, and she made a keening sound of pain that cut straight through him. Marcus adjusted his grip, cradled her as carefully as possible, and started walking toward the human forward medical station 3 kilometers away through hostile territory, ignoring his comms when his code demanded to know why his tracker showed him moving away from the rally point. By the time Marcus staggered into the forward medical station, the CarriedHer woman had passed out from pain, which was probably a mercy. The medics were shocked when he arrived carrying an enemy soldier, and the camp commander immediately threatened him with court-martial for violating standing orders and endangering the unit. But Marcus stood his ground, jaw set. "She's a prisoner of war entitled to medical treatment under the conventions. I'm not leaving her to die." The argument was still raging when the camp's xenomedic, Dr. Reeves, cut through the politics with terse professional assessment. The CarriedHer woman had extensive internal bleeding and would die within the hour without immediate intervention. The commander reluctantly authorized treatment, but made it clear Marcus would face consequences. Over the following days, as she recovered in the medical bay under armed guard, Marcus visited when his shifts allowed. She was awake now, watching him with confusion and suspicion he'd learned to read despite the species barrier. The xenolinguist assigned to debrief her translated their conversations. Her name was Saren. She was a communications specialist, not frontline infantry. When the human assault broke their defensive line, her commander had ordered full retreat and explicitly told wounded who couldn't move under their own power to accept honor in sacrifice, a euphemism for being abandoned to die. Through the translator, she asked Marcus why he saved her when humans and CarriedHer were enemies. Marcus struggled to articulate it, finally settling on "because you needed help. That's enough." Saren's reaction, translated carefully, was stark. "My superiors taught us that humans are barbaric, that you kill wounded enemies for sport or leave them to suffer. But you carried me, you risked yourself. Nothing in my training prepared me for this." She admitted that CarriedHer culture emphasized collective survival over individuals. Leaving wounded who slowed retreat was logical, efficient. But she'd watched Marcus's face when he found her, seen something she didn't expect, genuine distress at her suffering, determination to help despite the cost. It contradicted everything she'd been taught about humanity. As Saren recovered over weeks, she and Marcus developed tentative understanding that transcended language barriers and species differences. She taught him basic CarriedHer words. He brought her books and tried to explain human concepts like medical ethics and individual worth. She was fascinated and disturbed by human insistence on saving everyone, even enemies, even when tactically disadvantageous. Through their conversations, translated and sometimes fumbling, a larger picture emerged. The war started over resource rights on border worlds, but was sustained by deep cultural misunderstandings. CarriedHer saw human efforts to rescue wounded as weakness. Humans saw CarriedHer willingness to abandon their own as cruelty. Neither side had bothered to understand the other's values. Saren confessed that Marcus saving her had created a crisis in her understanding. She was raised believing humans were monsters, but he showed compassion when her own species showed none. How could she reconcile that? Marcus admitted he didn't have answers, but maybe that was the point. Maybe they'd been fighting over assumptions instead of reality. When Saren was medically cleared, Earth Command wanted to transfer her to a formal POW facility. But Marcus advocated for something unprecedented. Let her return to CarriedHer lines under truce with a proposal. She could tell her people what she experienced, challenge the narrative. It was massive risk. She could simply provide intelligence and return to fighting. But Marcus trusted that the woman who cried when he brought her coffee and explained he saved her because she mattered would honor the gesture. Saren agreed with her own addition. She'd tell her story, but she'd also carry Marcus's message. We're not your enemy, we're people who make different choices, and maybe it's time we understood why instead of just killing each other. The prisoner exchange happened on neutral ground. As Saren prepared to cross back to CarriedHer territory, she touched Marcus's hand, a gesture signifying profound debt in her culture, and said in careful English, "You showed me humans have honor. I will show my people. This is not a debt I can repay, but I can try to make it mean something." Weeks passed with no word. Then ceasefire negotiations suddenly began, unprecedented after 3 years of deadlock. The CarriedHer delegation included Saren, now promoted to cultural liaison. In the first session, she told her story, how she was abandoned by her own forces and saved by an enemy with no obligation to help. She described Marcus's face when he found her, the care he showed during recovery. She argued her people had been fighting an enemy they didn't understand, mistaking cultural differences for moral failings. The speech didn't end the war overnight, but it opened a door. Negotiations progressed slowly, painfully, but they progressed. Marcus testified about his decision, his simple answer resonating across delegations. She was hurt, I could help, everything else is just noise. 6 months later, a preliminary peace accord was signed. Fragile, contested by hardliners, but it existed. At the signing ceremony, Saren found Marcus and approached with formal CarriedHer posture, meaning deep respect. You carried me when